Hello, everybody. Welcome. Wow, it's 8:30 on a Saturday morning. It's so great to see all of you here. I'm Vanessa Rose. I'm the president and CEO of the American Composers Forum. Welcome. When I say composer, who do you think of? Are they white? Are they male? Alive? How many of you were in the audience last night when the AACM's Great Black Music Ensemble performed at the Cultural Center? Yeah, thank you.
We have no clue what's coming up. So this is a completely, truly improvised composition that we're all going to create, which is mostly what I do. When I say composition in the Indian paradigm, it's mostly this. So it's very hard for me to remember what I did a few seconds ago. So as you can imagine, that word composer has got so many kaleidoscopic facets to it. The first word we have is hearts open. I just love that. Shall we go about it? I invite you to join us.
Or less. So let me just start with framing, a little bit of framing. So I want to think about racial equity and what do we mean by racial equity. And to me, that work is about, getting rid of barriers and increasing access to participation, yes, but also to decision-making and power. That was talked about on the earlier panel. And that access to decision-making and power is really the critical piece for doing racial equity.
Another way of thinking about equity would be to expand and revive and energize our definition of composer, right? And for the people who are making music in diverse styles, who come from Caracas, from Lima, from Shanghai, from wherever, from the nations, to feel empowered and to feel validated as creators, right? And for us to have a thriving musical ecosystem in which all of that energy is harnessed and transform into the rich culture that I think we can have.
It's obvious people need creative expression, and sometimes I think music gets into too much dogma in terms of how we think about composers, how we think about compositions, how we think about the world, and this form of expressions offers release into other kind of fantasies, other kind of ways of conceptualizing what we do and how we perceive ourselves as human beings, because we all just are not right angles. We're all kind of angles. We're round. We're, like she was saying, we're art objects. We're all of that. And that's what that means. My body is an object. My mind, my soul, everything. So that's what this encompasses to me. So it's still needed in terms of free expression, because and particularly with the political times that we're now, everything is limited in terms of how we perceive things. I'm on panels all the time, and we discuss, well, how can you judge this against that? And we always have this paradigm of judgment. This is that, and that's this. Like for me, that's why we use the term great black music, because every time I hear jazz, it means I don't get paid.
I think the most important thing ACF could probably learn from the ACM is the idea of being open. When you think about, like Amina had mentioned, like stylistic, having no boundaries stylistically. So to be able to look at this idea of composition in a way that will embrace the expressions of many different people from many different experiences, I think that would really be a powerful transformation for ACF. It's really why, if you look at the ACM, you look at so many different members of ACM, each person has completely different music, but has been able to reach this really high standard of excellence with what they do because of that support. And also because we push each other, but nobody sounds the same. And that's been a really powerful thing that I think has made the ACM have international and historical impact. And so that's one thing to consider. Another thing for ACF to consider with what the ACM has done, your organization, ACF, has also endured for a really long time, and that's because people that are in there working really believe in it. So I think having a space for really supporting innovation, which means like trying new things, thinking outside of the box, because as Ernest had mentioned, that's really what the world needs right now. Like, we really need people with imaginations to come up with new ideas and to have new ways of visualizing how we can move through the world, because obviously a lot of these things are not working anymore. And so if you have a place where that can really flourish, where you can really give your composers a space to be themselves and to feel welcome, that they can come and be supported, I think that would be another like transformative, ACF is already doing that, but it would just take it to the next step to like really re-envision what is it to be a composer and like to create a language that embraces everyone.
I was on Think Tank in Chicago recently with the Joyce Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, Chicago Community Trust, and I coined a word. I call it cultural imperialism, because they come in, large entities come into small communities and they do their outreach, but they don't partner with local organizations to help further them and the large entity. And I said, well, I'm about solutions. What they should do is they should fund these organizations to do like ACF is doing now, in partnerships with organizations that are doing their work, and come into communities as partners and then create the work, and then they have support on the ground. And we need more of these kind of ventures. And just
from my perspective, normalization comes from visibility. So if we want to talk about some of the most common names in classical music as far as composers who are black, who comes to mind? William Grant Still, Florence Price, Duke Ellington, Scott Joplin. These are people that I found many audiences just don't know exist. They don't even know about these composers, and they don't know about the blackness that has always lived in classical music, and I know that in itself is a phrase that offers a lot of conversation. But just for the sake of this, I'm going to use that phrase, classical music. We've always been involved with this. All the way back into the 15th and 16th centuries, even in Europe, there's proof that we were a part of this, and that we were a part of this organically and authentically. My journey started as a 12-year-old when I walked into the band room and a guy handed me a bassoon. That's not me trying to be something else, that's me living my experience. But the lived experience of so many of us is just not visible. So the way I deal with that in my work now, anytime I air a piece of music by a black composer, I mention that in some way. Jonathan Bailey Holland's music makes it on my show all the time, and I announce you as a black composer because so many people just don't know that we exist. So we can't be a normal part of this conversation until we're a normal part of the conversation, and from my perspective, visibility is at the core of that right now.
How do you feel about that introduction to Jonathan?
Look, the whole conversation is, in some ways, a catch-22. I think I agree that until we get to the point where it's not a big deal, you have to make a big deal about it. And yet, as an artist, I don't write music because I'm black. I write music because I want to share my art. I used to worry a lot about all of this, and I used to, in my early works, try not to put anything that would suggest to anyone who didn't know who I was that I was a black composer, because I didn't want them to assume whatever I thought they would assume if they knew that. And then I sort of realized at a certain point that I'm not being genuine as an artist if I'm holding back something that I feel should be in my music. And if I'm not going to be genuine, then nobody's going to want to listen to my music. And it doesn't really matter what I say or do, that people are going to categorize it in whatever way, so I have to kind of stop worrying about that. So I think that's sort of where I land on it. Like, I can't think too much about it because then I'll waste time not writing the music. And so I think it's a benefit to let people know, and I think also at some point we should just do it. And if you're going to talk about me being a black composer, maybe we should put the adjective in front of every composer so that everybody has the same experience.
And if I can add to that, my philosophy is also rooted in the idea of pride. When you listen to music, let's say from a Scottish tradition, they're very proud of that. When even American music, when we want to talk about Aaron Copland and all those folks, that comes from a sense of pride. So, if people want to talk about me as the Black American public media host, I'm perfectly fine with that because I'm rooted in pride. Nina Simone famously sang the words, "To be young, gifted, and black." Oh, what a lovely thing to be. I consider being born black the best thing to have ever happened to me. And that, yeah, sure. And again, that visibility is so important. Maybe in 100 years, we will have been normalized in art music. We're not quite there yet. So the pride in who I am, the pride in the lineage I come from, and the pride in the future that I work toward just really fuels my beliefs that visibility is the most important thing for us these days.
What if we just eliminated all application fees? Having your applications being online based, I can't tell you how many times I still see calls that ask for multiple copies of printed scores for CDs. What does it mean to ask a composer to submit a score? So when I think of a musical score, I think of something that comes from a very Western classical tradition, which already excludes a large population of music makers out there in the world. Also, a lot of us don't rely on notation to create our work. A lot of us record our ideas into programs. A lot of us are performer composers who, well, just do our work out in the world or improvise. So what would it mean, instead of asking for scores, to just have an open format? To ask people to submit their materials in the way that best represents their work.
I asked this morning, who do you think of when I say composer? I hope I can ask that question now, after today, and you'll have a lot of new people to think of and hopefully connect with and hire.